thank you, Dr. Koshia, for giving me the opportunity to address the group here and share some thoughts with the team, with the people present here today on a topic which is of international interest and also interest in India, because if I look at the topic, one of the themes of the summit here today is next frontiers of growth. And to attain that growth, I think we have already embarked and we need to continue on a journey of regulatory harmonization. So I will be brief and highlight some examples of where harmonization initiatives are leading in the international forum and some thoughts to leave behind for the industry and the regulators here for where we can work towards harmonization in India as well. What is regulatory harmonization? So in a broad sense, harmonization is basically some commonalities in technical requirements and guidelines for medicines regulation, which basically will allow us to achieve the ultimate objective of providing high quality, safe, and effective medical products to the patients in India and worldwide. So in order to embark on this journey of harmonization, of course, initially there is a lot of differences which has historically existed within the regulatory mechanism across markets, but all markets is today gradually moving to a state of convergence and finally moving to a state of harmonization, which is the ultimate goal. What we do mean by harmonization is not just common documentation being created for regulatory use and use of industry, but also effective communication and collaboration between regulators, industry, and other stakeholders like patient groups and academia to ensure the overall end goal. All this will actually lead to a very collaborative approach of drug registration across markets, and will pave the way for a mutual recognition in a longer term, which is not probably, we are not there yet, but in the longer term, it is something that we can strive towards. But what we do not mean by harmonization is what sometimes is speculated, is just because something has been approved in a particular market, we need to adhere to that. It is not necessarily true. It does not mean loss of national sovereignty or autonomy in taking a decision whether a particular product is suitable for one's market. So the common documentation, some better communication and collaboration actually allows the information to be shared equally amongst all the regulatory authorities. And finally, the decision lies with the individual market depending on what is the need of the nation. So basically, what is driving harmonization today globally? Essentially, the world has become a small place. The barriers have been removed. Globalization is occurring in every sphere, including drug development, manufacturing, and distribution. India, we are aware, is a large exporter, not only of finished formulations of APIs for some markets, as well as food products. Now, if there are multiple regulatory mechanisms, it leads to a lot of complexity and sometimes slows down the process. The same site typically gets inspected by multiple regulatory authorities for the same product, and the site has multiple separate certifications. And sometimes there are varying and discordant regulatory requirements as well. So all this is actually driving towards a harmonized approach of drug registration across markets. What to harmonize? Now, typically, when a new drug is being developed, a lot of data is generated by the applicant. The same data then gets represented across different formats to satisfy the individual regulatory requirements of the individual markets. So here we definitely believe there is some scope of harmonizing because it is the same data and pretty much the same information being reflected in different formats. Subsequently, once the data is presented, then there's a regulatory process of review as well as inspection. Again, every authority applies its own yardsticks of review and inspection. Here as well, there is some opportunity of information sharing and collaboration, and finally, of course, regulatory decision, which still resides with individual regulators, but there may be some amount of harmonization or mutual recognition. Some of the established harmonization initiatives which have been successful so far internationally, just to name a few, are ICH, which is the International Conference of Harmonization, which lays out several guidelines on quality, efficacy, and safety, which is a guidance document for the industry to prepare to supply their products to the global markets. A successful example of harmonization is in the European Union, where the 29 countries come under the European Medicines Authority, and there's a process of centralized registration for some categories of products or mutual recognition for some categories of products, which allows early access to all 29 countries of a particular therapeutic option. WHO, which of course is established various medical, clinical, and technical standards to promote regulatory capability training and workshops. The PICS, which is basically a group for excellence in inspection. Again, it is non-binding, but the spirit of the PICS is to have a harmonized inspection capability across board. And there are FDA initiatives as well on quality by design. Even on a regional level, there are several initiatives which are currently active. I mean, ICH has a global cooperation group, which is for the non-ICH markets, and they kind of share knowledge for other markets, which helps them shape their guidelines. Africa has come out with a harmonization initiative for all the African markets, and they're coming out again with centralized registration for certain categories of products which are of critical interest to the region. In Asia Pacific region, there is the ASEAN. There is similar initiatives in Latin America and the Middle East. Basically, this is a very busy slide, so I will not talk through the full slide, but what I'm trying to emphasize is during the product life cycle from drug development through registration until the post-marketing life cycle support, there are innumerable stages involved in starting from clinical trials to creation of dossiers, maintenance of product labeling, manufacturing variations, and different markets have different varying requirements, which sometimes slows down registration, slows down implementation of changes or newer technologies, which would actually be beneficial to the end user. So this is a scope, where we can look at some kind of commonality of looking at data generation and registration. For harmonization to succeed, so what is an enabler or something which will help harmonization succeed? The most important is political will, the will and long-term vision of allowing harmonization to faster market access. And in India today, I think that is a perfect environment. We have the complete support of the government for early access of high-quality medicines to the patients in India. The involvement and engagement of regulators, industry, and stakeholders, agreement and information sharing between agencies, transparency between stakeholders will all finally drive harmonization initiatives. What are the benefits of harmonization in an Indian context? I mentioned earlier today to some of the colleagues here that in India, my company has a huge local manufacturing investment, in addition to, of course, importing products. So from both perspectives, we recognize the benefits of harmonization. One, of course, is standardization of quality standards for domestic as well as export products, which would remove sometimes we do get media snips about the perception of inadequate control or quality standards as an outcome of some inspections. But that perception would be removed if we kind of try and harmonize the quality standards in India. It will reduce duplication of data generation, reduce complexity and risk of errors. We will achieve a first-time right one dossier, which will allow us to have a finite review approval timeline and will serve the ultimate goal of early access to the market. If we were to look from the perspective of the imported products that come into the country, one of the major challenges is the price. The price sometimes becomes a barrier for many of the products to be made available in India, but India-specific requirements sometimes adds to the cost base and makes it a little unviable to import some of the products in general. So this would also, by harmonizing the requirements and standards, this would also enable the products to be made available at affordable prices. It will also allow us to submit a first-time right dossier, again, finite timelines, and early approval and access in the Indian market. These are some of the points which I put together, which are personally my views, where we can consider evaluating the scope of harmonization in India. One, of course, the top one is something which recently the government of India is also proposing, of adoption of WHO GMP certification for local manufacturing sites. I recognize it is a journey, there are challenges, but as long as we have a plan and some milestones and certain suitable opportunities for the industry to collaborate with the regulators, I would believe this is going to be beneficial for India in the long run to have the same quality and standards for products for the domestic market and the international markets. APIC's membership, which will allow us to understand and also share knowledge with all the other regulators in the same platform on inspection, because inspection is an area of great emphasis in India, and we are actually probably will move towards an annual inspection self-certification schemes. To move from an observer of ICH to member by adopting similar good clinical practice, GMP, and stability guidelines. Recognition and acceptance of global clinical data unless there is evidence through pharmacokinetic studies to show that the Indian population will behave differently for a particular new medicinal product. Another area would be pharmacopoeial harmonization. I do recognize that there is some level of harmonization between the Indian pharmacopoeia and the European or the British pharmacopoeia, but I believe there is opportunity for further collaboration for setting similar standards, and also the recognition of the international pharmacopoeias, even if the monograph is in IP. Another area where India is on a journey is pharmacovigilance. There's a lot happening on pharmacovigilance in India to assess the safety of the drugs on the Indian population. Having said that, there is a lot that has already happened worldwide, and we can adopt and harmonize some of the information which is already available globally. This is some of the direct harmonization which we can do within India is what I would like to propose. One is for new drug submissions which we submit to the Central Regulatory Authority, the Office of the DCGI. Currently, we actually have an Indian format. So I would request the authority to consider using the ICH format for the basic quality, clinical, and non-clinical modules, and use whatever additional data is required can be provided as appendices of regional information, which is, of course, the authority has the right to ask for more data, but can technically will handle separately rather than reworking the whole dossier. Another area which I would humbly submit to all the state regulatory agencies and the commissioners present here today is to have a standardized set of data requirements for registration, renewals, and other activities which we conduct in India. A standardization of product lifecycle management in terms of renewal, handling of manufacturing changes, and labeling. And finally, a standardization also of labeling requirements, because a lot of information actually goes into our product labeling, which makes the labeling virtually unreadable for a lot of the people because of the amount of text that goes into the labeling. So these are some of the thoughts which I thought I would leave behind and share with the group. And ultimately, what I would strongly advocate for is that by promoting harmonization. We would reduce duplication. We would have a better use of the limited resources within the industry as well as within the regulatory setup. We would learn from the enriching knowledge sharing across geographies. And finally, this would ultimately end up with faster access of medicines to the patients in India. Thank you. I would like to conclude with this, that collaboration is everything and would lead to regulatory excellence. Are there any questions?
Any questions in the audience? Thank you, ma'am. That was a wonderful message in the last. Collaboration is everything. So this is what the idea of this summit is, collaboration between the industry, between the government. And after this wonderful presentation by Sukanya Choudhury, I would request my colleague Biswajit Sahu, senior correspondent from Odisha, to give away the speaker memento to our esteemed speaker. Ma'am, from you. Front. A round of applause for our speaker.